for security reasons, we hid our heroes in the video.
I hesitated for a long time before telling this story, afraid that no one would believe me. But now I know, something simply cannot be explained by logic. I'm sharing this not to scare anyone, but to make people think, what if the afterlife truly exists? I was a nurse. At least, I used to be. The hospital where I worked was in a small town, where night shifts were usually quiet. But that night, something was off. The rain tapped against the windows, throwing cold droplets onto the glass, and the darkness seemed thicker than usual. The staff was in low spirits. The night before, our doctor, Stephen, had been hit by a drunk driver. He was an odd man, rarely speaking to anyone, but he was still part of our hospital family. We hadn't yet come to terms with the fact that he was gone. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a call on the hospital's internal line. A chill ran down my spine when I saw where it was coming from, the basement morgue. That was unusual. I picked up the phone, and the voice on the other end made me freeze. Julia? It's Stephen. There's some kind of mistake. I have 3 folders with the deceased's records, but there are only 2 bodies. I froze, gripping the receiver tighter. This had to be a prank. Only Jacob, my colleague, could come up with something like this to lift my spirits. Very funny, Jacob, I said and hung up. A moment later, the reception doors opened, and Jacob walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. I shuddered. He was here. But, if he was here, then who had called? What's wrong? He asked, noticing how pale I'd gone. I silently nodded toward the phone and then explained that someone had called from the morgue, and at first, I thought it was him playing a joke on me. We decided to wake Ethan, our security guard. A former police officer, he didn't believe in ghosts and always looked for a logical explanation for everything. When he heard our story, he raised an eyebrow but agreed to go down to the morgue with us. The metal doors creaked open, revealing the dark passageway leading down. The morgue was always cold, but tonight, the chill cut through to the bone. 2 bodies lay in their places. The 3rd spot belonged to Stephen, but he wasn't there. Instead, he was sitting at the table, casually resting his bare feet on the surface. A morgue tag was still on his finger. In one hand, he held a phone receiver. We froze, unable to believe what we were seeing. What the hell? Jacob whispered. Ethan immediately rushed forward, checking Stephen's wrist for a pulse. Cold. Lifeless. Someone broke into the hospital, moved the body, set it up like this, and called you to scare you, Ethan said calmly. It sounded logical. It had to be a prank. We locked the morgue and went upstairs to the security room. Ethan checked the surveillance footage. But no one had entered or left. The only ones who had gone down to the morgue were us. We sat in silence, trying to process it, when the phone at reception rang again. We hurried over. Once again, the same thing, the internal line, a call from the morgue. None of us dared to pick up. We just stood there, listening as the ringing cut through the silence like a warning. The ringing lasted for several minutes, then stopped. But a minute later, it started again. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each new ring made me shudder. Jacob squeezed my shoulder. We're not going down there again, he said, and I agreed. We spent the rest of the night together, silently listening to the calls that no one answered. At 7 in the morning, the next shift arrived. We handed over our duties and left the hospital. I took a deep breath of fresh air and looked at the sun rising over the town. Jacob glanced back at the hospital, as if checking whether a shadow from that night would follow us. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter around him. Looks like Stephen never realized he was the 3rd deceased, he said quietly. From that day on, I never worked another night shift. Because even now, when night covers the city, I hear the phone ringing, and I know, it's him calling again.